Okay, you can begin.
Okay, good evening, class. I am Natoya Bain, and my group partner is Rodel Worrell. Today we will be discussing Chapter 5 of the Exploring Leadership book, which is Understanding Others. Slide. This chapter briefly explores some characteristics of gender, ethnicity, and culture that illustrate how differences need to be understood as you work towards leadership that is inclusive and empowering. The chapter also explores various leadership processes, including communication, conflict resolution, and decision making that are influenced by diverse approaches. Slide. I want everyone to picture themselves in a typical meeting of an organization that you are a member of. It could be a work team meeting, parents teachers meeting, a sports team, church, or a group meeting of any kind. Have you ever found yourself wondering? You might zone out when someone is speaking and look at everyone in the room because you have nothing else to look at and wonder about their motives and their behavior. You might wonder why they fidget or why they wear that style of jewelry, for instance. I believe that in order for you to understand others, you have to understand yourself first. Do you understand why you do the things you do or feel the way you feel towards situations? Slide. A central goal of understanding yourself is to develop a sense of awareness that can result in true community and common purpose with others. There are three central questions to ask yourself in any setting. How am I like no one else here? How am I like some others here? How am I like everyone here? Slide. Each of us brings uniqueness and individuality to any situation. As we explored in Chapter 4, your skills, background, and preferences create a unique person, you. But you are not alone. To be truly inclusive and empowering, you must also understand others. I want to share with you all a short and very insightful video about understanding yourself in order to understand others. Hope you enjoy and learn something useful. Radal, I'm not hearing anything.
Oh. How do I change that?
Go to your settings and make sure you're also sharing computer audio.
Okay. Is that right? Are you hearing it now?
No, I think you had to do that when you were sharing your screen. So go out and come back in and pay attention to the options when you were sharing. So stop sharing and then come back in and see what happens. When you are coming back in, there should be a little tab at the top somewhere there to share computer audio.
Oh, okay. Yes, I see it.
Okay.
Yeah, this is my
Sorry
first
for
time
that
using
little
Teams.
inconvenience.
Okay, I will replay the video.
One of the things that causes so many problems in life, in relationships, in society, in the world at large is our failure to understand one another, to understand why others think and behave as they do, especially when we find that behavior unpleasant, irrational, irritating, unsettling, uncomfortable, disturbing. I often hear people say, "Why do people act this way?" Or, "I just don't understand why people act that way." And then we tend to come up with explanations like these people are just ignorant or brainwashed or bigoted or selfish or whatever it happens to be. And not that there isn't some truth in those statements at times, but it's really only scratching the surface. We're not really getting to the root of it. There were certainly times in my own life, especially when I was much younger, when I really did have a great deal of difficulty understanding why people behave as they do, why they think the way they do, why they believe things they believe and act in ways that might be generally unpleasant. I didn't really understand it, but I did have a lot of judgment in regard to it. But over the course of my life, I spent a lot of time in introspection, in self-reflection, getting to know myself more deeply, looking more deeply at my own thoughts and behaviors, including and oftentimes, especially my undesirable qualities, what you might call negative traits and tendencies, looking into those things in order to better understand them. Why do I behave in this way or that? What's beneath my bitterness? What's behind my rudeness? Why do I get so irritated with some people? Why do I hold to some particular belief and reject another, and all this sort of thing? And the more time that I've spent investigating all of this within myself and coming to understand it, the more I understand others, the more I understand why others behave in similar ways. And not only in regard to behaviors which might affect others negatively, but also things like why a person might feel frightened or upset, angry or sad, even in regard to something where I might respond very differently. But by understanding the basic mechanisms of my own mind, my own psyche, conscious and unconscious, I gain a greater understanding of others and a greater sense of empathy and compassion as well. Because deep down, we're really not so different. Even if we're behaving very differently, we're all operating from basically the same underlying operating system. But because we all have different life experiences, living in different environments under different circumstances and so on, all of that affects how we respond to life, how we think and feel and behave. And there's a great deal of value in this kind of understanding, because if we can better understand one another, then that opens the door for deeper connection, for better communication, as well as the opportunity to better resolve misunderstandings, tensions, and conflicts, which are at the root of so many problems in the world.
Okay, I know that video was a little choppy, but the audio seemed fine. So what are your thoughts on the video? He made a lot of sense, yeah? Okay, so I wasn't going to add this bit of information, but then I found it important to do so. As the nation becomes more diverse and the world becomes smaller and more connected through technology, it becomes flatter. What Friedman is stating is that the playing field has been leveled by globalism, and events in one country affect those in all other countries, and that economic and foreign policy should benefit the world as a whole instead of individual countries. That's why people who live in distant third world countries like Trinidad can't participate in first world country economics like America. We are all connected and we have technology to thank for that. For example, if you want something you see online, don't you order it? Doesn't it come to you from another country? Slide. Okay, we are on to the first topic within chapter 5, and that's individuality and commonality. When you understand yourself, observe others around you, and ask yourself those 3 questions mentioned earlier. How am I like no one else here? How am I like some others here? How am I like everyone here? You'll realize that others might be similar to you or very different from you. Even if others look the same, they may have different values, preferences, or approaches to learning. Some of the differences in ourselves and others come from our gender, ethnicity, or culture. Some come from our environments. For example, my best friend Raquel has always been negative, defensive, depressed, and have low self-esteem. I always wondered why she's like that. After studying Carl Rogers' humanistic psychology theory, I understood that her behavior and personality were hugely affected by the environment she grew up in. Her parents failed in showing her the unconditional positive regard she needed. Her parents aren't affectionate or accepting towards her. They lack empathy and are verbally and sometimes physically abusive towards her. She feels neglected and unloved. She told me that she never felt valued or respected by her family. She also has difficulty accepting her failures. According to Rogers' theory, my best friend's ideal self and self-image are incongruent. She thinks she isn't capable of reaching her goals in life, so I try to motivate her and build her self-worth. How many of you sometimes feel this way? How many of you can relate? We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. Research into the human genome has certainly confirmed this. Next time you go out and end up in a group setting, whether you go to a bar or club or a meeting with others, students or parents, I want you to look around and observe the people there, men, women of different ages. You might see one or two people who look similar to you. They may have visible racial or ethnic characteristics. You might see people wearing symbolic clothes like your own, a wedding ring, a school ring, a cross pendant, if you're a Christian, or a hijab if you're a Muslim female. You might also identify with others when they express ideas you agree with, share experience you have had, or have goals you also hold. Regardless of visible characteristics that might have initially made them seem unlike you, the more time you spend with people, you may begin to find similarities of interests, like being in the same major, living close by, thinking alike about current politics, liking the same sports teams, working out daily, being students or being parents, or being affiliated with the same religion. Whatever the similarities may be, finding some people like you creates a feeling of association called social identity and leads to identification of subcommunities. Social identity refers to people's self categorizations in relation to their group membership, the we. I'll explain more about this a little later. A subcommunity is a distinct grouping within a community. So basically, it's a community that exists as part of a larger community. Slide. The challenge of leadership is coming to common purpose from the vast differences that individuals bring to a situation. Finding the purpose, vision, and common commitments that create a we from a group of individuals is a challenge of community. We are all connected on a transcendent level. Something binds you to everyone around you. Look at us, for instance. We are bounded because we all want to learn this subject, though we do different degrees. No matter how different we are from one another, we have the same goal to pass this course. And this will happen to you throughout your life with different groups of people. I feel bound to the other parents in my son's class. We all have different jobs and lifestyles, but we share the same vision. We all want our kids to do well and pass for a good school, and we do help out one another along this journey, just like how we help out each other when we have group assignments and assessments. To truly establish a sense of we, the individuals need to let go of self enough to see the connections to others. Slide. In Western tradition, the word for the first person singular I is capitalized, placing emphasis on the individual, while those with non-Western roots may find it easier to envision we, because those cultural traditions emphasize the collective, the family, or group. To take a look at this figure, I know it may seem a bit confusing, but it's really simple. Leadership educators have encouraged I to you to we. The focus on the individual, uppercase I, needs to be de-emphasized to lowercase I to truly listen and engage with another you as equals, so that all can move forward to become a community we. So what this means to me is to take the focus off yourself a bit and see what connects you to another person, your similarities or ties you share that can help you move forward in understanding others and growing as a community you are a member of. Slide. Okay, so I'm giving you all a challenge. Challenge 1. Try to understand yourself well enough to know how others see you and to modify your own behaviors and attitudes to encourage a spirit of openness and connection with others. Or you can just cheat and ask them. That's what I do because clearly I don't know myself well enough. So I ask my colleagues what they think of me, and their answers always surprise me. And I'm like, wow, you all think so highly of me. And I try to see myself in that light. Challenge 2. No cheating this time. Try to engage in the hard work of understanding others so that together you can form meaningful community and engage in coalitions for group change. We actually subconsciously do this, especially in group or teamwork. That's the only way we will all succeed as a group or win as a team. Slide. It seems like these slides have a slight delay. Okay, the pluralism of a group refers to the plethora of differences that need to be understood in order to accomplish shared purposes. Pluralistic leadership results when heterogeneous groups of people work together to accomplish change. Pluralistic leadership is enhanced when a person understands, develops an appreciation for, and possesses the skill needed to communicate across these borders and come to common understandings. Because Trinidad is such a diverse place with so many different religions, races, and cultural backgrounds, we will always be put in a heterogeneous group. We are in one right now in this class. Even though some members may be of the same race or gender or major, we will always have great differences in our personalities, learning preferences, and experiences. The point is, though we are quite different, we need to communicate and come to a mutual understanding in order to work together successfully. Slide. Now we are on to understanding gender diversity. Have you ever asked yourself, how does my gender influence my attitudes and behaviors? How does my experience as a man or a woman shape my worldwide view? And how might it shape the worldwide view of others? It is important to know that the answers to these questions in order to understand yourself and others well and the influence you have on others around you. Characteristics of gender differences are too numerous to develop fully. But it is important to realize that we all deal with both sex roles and gender roles. The two terms are often used interchangeably, but they are quite different when you think about it. Sex roles are those expectations resulting from biology, like pregnancy or muscle mass, whereas gender roles are socially constructed expectations that get labeled masculine or feminine. Last semester for Libs, I did a thesis statement on a focus research question. Should transgender women athletes be prohibited from competing in women's athletics? I found it to be a very interesting topic because it's an issue that the sporting world is facing currently. In my opinion, yes, they should be prohibited because biologically speaking, due to men's high testosterone hormone levels, they are faster and can throw farther, can lift more, have larger muscles, and so on naturally. So when it comes to sports, they should not be allowed to play sports based on their gender identity, but on their biological sex at birth, despite taking estrogen hormones. They can act as feminine as they want, they are still male. This is a very debatable topic, so I'll move on, but I hope you get the idea. Slide. Gender roles are often limiting and inaccurate when assigned to individual men and women. For example, although only women can bear children and are nurturing, men can also be nurturing towards children. They just can't give birth to them. But historically, that role has been considered feminine. In the same way, as I mentioned athletes earlier, sports like rugby or football that require high physical contact, it is harder for women to engage in because those sports are considered masculine. Women still play them, but competitively amongst themselves. You wouldn't see an all men's team playing against an all female team. It will be unfair and unsafe. Women who are not nurturing or men who are not athletic may suffer from gender role discrimination by acting or being different from conventional paradigms. When you stray from the norm, people judge you, watch, and treat you differently, and you are left misunderstood. Likewise, those who hold a conventional leadership expectation that leaders should be decisive, in charge, competitive, and self reliant may be holding a traditional masculine paradigm that excludes many women, as well as many men who are very capable but who do not lead from that perspective. There are a lot more female leaders now than they had in the past. The ministry I work for, the minister is a woman. But I feel like the majority of women in these leadership roles, even though they are great leaders, subconsciously they still feel second to men. They feel like they have to be on the same level as a man or speak even better in order to be respected. And I think that's a result of traditional masculine paradigm. Same goes for men who don't consider themselves to be very manly. From the beginnings of our lives, our gender role perceptions are shaped by the many messages we receive from the environment. Where we live, the way we were brought up, family traditions, our interactions and experiences with others, the things we watch, the things we were taught, all contributed in shaping our personalities and perceptions. Many boys learn to be tough, objective, unemotional, and competitive, and many girls learn to be polite, caring, emotional, and supportive. In this modern world we live in, where people can be gender fluid and identify as whatever they want, no one wants to discriminate, so some parents within their power make an effort to filter what their kids are exposed to, like storybooks or toys, making sure that it does not promote gender roles or sex stereotypes. But children will still learn these roles from school, their peers, toys, and TV. But it's the other way around for me, actually. I try to teach my son how to be a man and what is expected of him, but then I see him watching questionable looking YouTubers, men with pink hair behaving odd, and some of the boys in his class are very feminine. Of course, he told me this, and based on my own observations. Slide. To understand how men and women have come to be as they are, we can learn from children's development. The way we play in childhood establishes patterns of how we work and communicate as adults. Boys often play outside in rough and tumble games, and extroverted leaders shout commands in competitive settings. Boys prefer games where they could win, like video games or computer games that are often team-based with complicated rules and ranking orders that involve dominating and killing your enemies. For example, Call of Duty and Fortnite. Girls, however, often play inside in calm settings with one another or with a small group of friends. Girls prefer games that are non-competitive, games that highlight intimacy and social relationships. For example, jump rope, tea party, or play dollhouse. Females seek and value intimacy and relationships due to their social learning during playtime and their life experiences, while males generally seek and value independence. As an individual, I want you to all think about what you seek and value most in this life and think of why you value those things. Doing this can help you achieve them. Intimacy is key in a world of connection in which individuals negotiate complex networks of friendship. Minimize differences, try to reach consensus, and value the appearance of superiority, which would highlight differences. In a world of status, independence is key because our primary means of establishing status is to tell others what to do, and taking orders is a marker of low status. We experience this in our everyday lives, some at home, some at church, school, and our working environments. When I think of intimacy, I think of having deep connections, conversations, forming bonds with others, building trust, and supporting one another. Remember that there is great variation among men and women, but these patterns do raise our awareness and understanding of differences. Slide. Men and women tend to hold different attributions for their successes and failures. Many women tend to credit their successes to external factors like luck and being in the right place at the right time. They credit their failures to internal factors like not being prepared or not having the right skills or not having enough time. As a woman, say I'm being praised for a job well done at work. In the past, I have said stuff like, well, it wasn't just me, it was a team effort, you know? And when I fail to do something properly or to the best of my ability, I have said, if I was given more time, it would have turned out much better. Many men tend to credit successes to internal factors like being prepared and capable and attribute their failures to external factors like fate, others not doing their part, or bad luck. I'm sure the men in this class can relate to that. I have heard guys say after an unfortunate situation, well, I guess it was God's will for it to happen that way. Slide. Psychological and physiological data on sex-linked traits suggest that the degree of overlap between the sexes is as important or more important than the average differences between them. Sex-linked, as related to genetics, refers to characteristics, traits, or disorders that are influenced by genes carried on the sex chromosomes. Slide. Both men and women are capable of making good decisions, leading effectively, being responsible group members, and communicating with clarity, but they may go about doing those things differently than the other sex would. For example, studies have found that women tend to be more collaborative and participative in their leadership style, while men may be more directive and authoritarian. This is not to say that one style is better. It simply highlights the different approaches men and women may take when leading a team. Side. Because men have traditionally held many visible leadership positions, the conventional paradigm of leadership was often socially constructed as having these same male characteristics. Despite progress in gender equality, there are still lingering power imbalances in society. These imbalances are reflected in the continued emphasis on differences between genders and the unequal status assigned to men's perspectives and creations. This can manifest in various ways, such as in the workplace, politics, media, and culture. Recognizing these power dynamics is essential for addressing and challenging gender inequality and working towards a more equitable society. Take a look at these top 15 great historical leaders of the world. From political figures and social activists to spiritual leaders and revolutionaries, these 15 individuals have left a permanent mark on humanity. But what do you observe about these leaders? Anyone can tell me what they observe about this group of leaders? It's right there in the center. There's only one woman. Okay, next slide. Expectations that limit people's range of roles and suppress their individuality will likely inhibit their effectiveness in their communities. Sex or gender, however, is only one identity perspective we bring to a situation. We all have other salient social identities that are based on attributions such as our culture, ethnicity, age, or sexual orientation. In the past, when I went to a couple job interviews and didn't get the position, I often wondered why. Was it because of my socioeconomic status, race, age, sexual orientation, religion, spirituality, gender, nationality, educational attainment? Who knows? Any one or two of those identities could have been the reason why I didn't get through. Side. Okay, we are now on to understanding cultural diversity. Culture is the sum total of ways of living, including values, beliefs, aesthetic standards, linguistic expression, patterns of thinking, behavioral norms, and styles of communication, which a group of people has developed to assure its survival in a particular physical and human environment. It also encompasses a group's shared knowledge and practices and plays a significant role in shaping human societies and individual identities. Many cultures coexist simultaneously in any group. Effective leaders need to develop an appreciation for multiculturalism to build inclusiveness, collaboration, and common purposes. This is a norm in Trinidad. Whether you are a part of a team or group at work or school, the people within that group will be of different ethnicities, cultures, and religions. Whether it be Indian, African, Indigenous, Chinese, Portuguese, Spanish, or European, whether they be Hindu, Muslim, Catholic, Christian, Baptist, Seventh-day Adventist, or Jehovah's Witness, the majority of our people respect each other's cultural heritage and celebrate with them. Slide. Right. Culture has often been described. No, go back to the other side. Oh, no, sorry, the correct side. Culture has often been described in terms of race and ethnicity. Race is a somewhat suspect concept used to identify large groups of human species who share a more or less distinctive combination of hereditary physical characteristics. You all must look like family members or even come across a person of your same race that looked like you before. Slide. The division of the world's peoples in distinct groups, red, black, white, or yellow peoples, has become so deeply embedded in our psyches, so widely accepted, many would think that it is crazy to suggest its falsity. I want to play a video for you all called the doll test. Some of you all may have come across a similar video before. It is a psychological experiment to test the degree of marginalization felt by children caused by prejudice, discrimination, and racial segregation. Basically, the effects that racism have on children. It might make you a bit emotional, so prepare yourself.
Quale bambola è bianca? Quale bambola è nera? Quale delle due è bella?
Questa.
Qual è quella bella? Qual è quella brutta? E qual è quella buona? Quale è cattiva? Qual è buona?
Lei.
Perché è buona?
Perché ha gli occhi celesti.
Quale è cattiva? perché è cattiva?
Perché è tutto nero.
E qual è la bambola che ti somiglia di più? Quale bambola è nera?
È offeso. Tu, perché mi hai chiamato nero? Mi offendi perché altri bambini mi hanno offeso con cattiveria.
No, io non ho usato nessuna cattiveria.
Quello sto mi sta guardando storto.
Okay, that video was a lot choppier than I would have liked. It kind of took the essence from it. What happened is that the kids all chose the black doll as the bad one, and they also chose the black doll as the doll that looks like them. So they felt like horrible after, because that's how they were brought up to, feel by the experiences. All right, so historically, race has been a very powerful aspect of life in the United States and continues to impact every campus today. It has been used to marginalize whole groups of people, and students on campuses experience racism every day. I saw a video on YouTube once. It made American news, where a group of white students were picking on a few black students for sitting at a table where the white students usually sit. It's like history repeating itself. There were a couple movements in the 60s and 70s where black students stood up for their rights. There was one called the Sit-In Movement that happened in the year 1960. Anyone ever heard of that? The Sit-In Movement.
Yeah.
Okay. Where 4 black students sat at a whites-only lunch counter at the Greensboro downtown Woolworth store. There was another one that happened in February 7, 1969, called the Black Student Strike. Anyone know of that one? Okay, well, black students at UW-Madison called for a campus-wide student strike to propel their long-standing grievances. Joined by thousands of white allies, they held rallies to educate the community about racial inequities, boycotted classes, took over lecture halls, and blocked building entrances. The protest lasted 2 weeks. Next slide. The relational leadership model, with its emphasis on inclusion and empowerment, embraces the belief that the group, team, organization, community, nation, and worldwide will be made better, more resilient, ultimately fostering a sense of belonging and cohesion among its members when all participants are heard, made visible, and valued for their contributions. Slide. Historically, the dominant culture, the culture in the powerful majority, has not had to examine its beliefs and practices because it is not disadvantaged by them. America's attention to racial and ethnic diversity has led to new awareness of what it means to be white and European origin in American culture. People who are not in the majority are often judged by the majority standards. This reminds me of the way the white racist policemen in America harass, beat, and sometimes kill innocent black people. Well, everyone knows about the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't have to ask you all that. And it was based around the same principle. Slide. Even well-meaning people in the majority culture often take for granted the benefits of white privilege, which include shopping without being followed, being able to buy or rent housing of their choice, and easily find toys and pictures that look like themselves. When black people go into a store, some people automatically think they can't afford the items and that they will steal from the store. White people don't have to worry about this discrimination. Also, as a graphic designer living in Trinidad, I often have to find images of multi-ethnic groups of people doing actions that relate to the artwork. And it is much, much easier to find white people doing the actions than Indian or Black people. In a general sense, it is useful to think of the privileges afforded any of us by virtue of personal characteristics that place us in a powerful majority. For example, being male, heterosexual, able-bodied, educated, financially comfortable, and examine closely how unconsciously those privileges may actually cause or influence the oppression of others. In Trinidad, some people work really hard to achieve what they want, whether it's be to get into a school, a new job, get into an elite club, whatever, and sometimes don't get through, whatever the reason, and others don't work hard but get through because of links. When I say links, I don't mean your debit card. I mean the connections you have with what we consider our rich people who are privileged. Anyone can call some names, any rich families in Trinidad, like Sabga, Hadid, the Freitas, Camacho, basically all the Syrian families and anyone in politics. You will get through if they consider you or if your father did a favor for them. Slide. We must examine how the characteristics of these forms of privilege may be attached to our expectations of what it means to be a leader or to not be a leader. And we must learn to value or at least recognize that leadership may take on different characteristics, such as integrity, delegation, communication, self-awareness, gratitude, learning agility, influence, empathy, courage, and respect. Riddell will now move on to understanding international diversity.
Okay, hi everyone. So understanding how to work with persons from other countries could be a complex, but also a very exciting and rewarding experience. At times, it can also be very challenging. One of the great opportunities afforded to some college students is a chance to get to know and work with students from other nations. I know in COSTAT, we have many students that aren't from Trinidad. So, like even a few in this class, I think, are from different countries. So, talking with students and learning about their culture could help you learn more about, things outside your country, and even share your cultural norms with others who may not be familiar. As Javidan and House noted in describing global leaders, to be successful in dealing with people from other cultures, managers need knowledge about cultural differences and similarities among countries. They also need to understand the implications of the differences and the skills required to act and decide appropriately and in a culturally sensitive way. Global leadership development means increasing your adaptability, your cultural empathy, your acceptance of ambiguity, your lack of xenophobia. Xenophobia, for those who know, is the dislike or prejudice against people from other countries, your cultural relativity, and awareness of one's own roots and cultural biases. An outlook of cultural relativity, excellent relational skills, curiosity, and emotional intelligence distinguish successful global leaders. Culture is defined as a set of shared values and beliefs in which the values are people's aspirations about the way things should be done, and the beliefs are people's perceptions of how things are done in their countries. There are different ways people greet each other all across the world. Generally in Trinidad, we might sorry, we might use a simple handshake, or when you greet someone, or if it's someone you might hail them out and thing. But in different countries, there would be different ways to greet people. So in Middle Eastern countries, handshakes involve the right hand only, where the left hand is considered unclean. Visitors to China will want to lighten their grip, while folks introducing themselves to Germans should know to stop after one firm downward yank. In India, Nepal, Cambodia, and Thai cultures, you press your palms together in an upward pointing prayer position, typically at heart level or higher, then bend your head slightly forward to take a bow. In India and Nepal, you might hear the phrase Namaste uttered during the greeting. This term translates to bowing to you and is considered a sign of respect and gratitude. In Japanese culture, a deeper bow indicates a higher level of respect than a slight bow. 90 degrees is the max. And prayer hands aren't used. Men bow with their hands at their sides and women with their hands on their thighs. Knowledge about other countries become increasingly important as the world becomes more connected. When working with others from different nations, realizing they may differ from you in the dimensions mentioned in this report could help you understand them better and work with them more effectively. Your cultural heritage. We encourage you to read about your cultural heritage to see how you may have acquired the values and beliefs of your culture or ethnicity, and in what ways have you diverged from them. Depending on your background, you may have developed specific morals and values that guide the way you think about things. There are specific practices that are associated with different ethnic and religious groups. If whichever faith you're based in, whether it's Hindu, Muslim, Christianity, you may have certain values that stem from those groups and communities. Even the type of household environment you live in could instill certain beliefs. Maybe you might not keep those beliefs. Maybe you may get older and you would learn of different faiths that you're not used to that associate more with you or in line with your personality or what makes you happy or gives you comfort. Read about a group that is different from your own. You might study the white or European American cultures, African American or Black culture, Asian American cultures, Latino or Hispanic or Chicano cultures, Native American traditions, and international students who come from other countries. I know a lot of shows we end up watching could have good insight and information on various cultures. A lot of action movies just take place in European settings. Some also take place in Chinese settings, and they show a lot of those cultures and practices. Like we have some telenovelas that show Mexican or Hispanic cultures. If anyone watches anime, you would see the Japan and Japanese traditional practices and folklore. Learn more about aging and adult development, deaf culture, religious diversity, and regional differences. It will be useful to be aware of the assumptions that a person coming into a group might have that would influence the person's behavior. It may be most useful to start with you. Building multicultural appreciation. Being an effective leader or participant in a diverse organization, or being a leader who brings diversity to the organization, requires that we know more about developing an openness and appreciation of various cultures and aspects of aspects of how others may differ. Paul Patterson supports this idea by noting that individuals need to develop their awareness, knowledge, and skills to be able to work effectively in a multicultural environment. David Hoops presents an intercultural learning process model that describes how we develop and learn to communicate clearly and understand people and cultures that stem different from our own. So here's Hoops' intercultural learning process. So the first stage is ethnocentrism. This is a human survival response that tells us our own culture is best. So individuals in this stage may be intolerant and hostile towards people of other cultures and other cultural backgrounds, and they usually discriminate against these people. Individuals who do not move beyond this stage tend to feel their culture is superior and impose it onto others. So they feel like their culture is the best of the best. The next stage is awareness. This is the first step out of ethnocentrism. This stage involves the acknowledgement that other cultures exist and the awareness that they have a culture. The individual at this stage becomes aware that differences are culturally based and that they are part of a given people's way of thinking and acting. The next is understanding. This stage involves the acquiring of knowledge and information about other cultures on a rational, cognitive level. The individual begins to piece together the puzzles of all the other cultures and pieces of information about values and customs and beliefs and those sort of things. And it occurs in a detached and separate way. The next step is acceptance and respect. So individuals at this stage accept the validity of other cultures without comparing or judging them against one's own. So you stop seeing your culture as the best culture, and you understand there are different cultures different to yours, and you understand that it's not just about you. So a change in attitude of it's okay for them occurs, a relativistic approach, a live and let live attitude results, and the value of other cultures is for others, not me. The transition stages of awareness and understanding lead to willingness to accept and respect that others do have a legitimate cultural view. This tolerance has led to an examination of one's own culture, but to the recognition that it may be all right for others to hold the views and values they possess from their cultural view. Some would say that acceptance is still a negative attitude. It may lead to the civility of tolerance, but does not yet place the same value on another's views as one's own. The transition from the tolerance step in the process toward multiculturalism moves forward with appreciating and valuing certain aspects of other cultures. This does not mean that everything about another culture or way of doing things is appreciated, but that a recognition of the strengths, assets, and values of another cultural view is occurring. For example, we have learned to appreciate the international foods, music, and dance that are incorporated into our daily life. This stage means comparing others to our own cultural view and becoming more subjective about this assessment. This leads to the next transition in selectively adopting values or aspects of another culture that are seen as worthy or admirable. Aspects of valuing another culture, for example, the role of elders or the role of the environment, are integrated into a person's own life out of admiration and choice. The goal of this process is multiculturalism, which is not a final state, but an ongoing process of comfort in learning about and appreciating other cultures, a lifelong learning task. This openness to new experiences enriches a person's own life and makes it possible to share aspects of a person's own culture that may be of value to others. Helping the aging culture to be more open to youth culture, or the Black Student Union and the Jewish Union coming to an appreciation of each other's perspectives. Think of the lessons many could learn from Native Americans. A benefit of multiculturalism is to grow beyond seeing the world only in our own terms, to seeing the legitimate views of others. This appreciation does not mean we'll agree or even find decision making easy, but it should mean that we will understand others' views. I will share a video, a very short video on cultural diversity and multiculturalism. Okay, so I hope that video was clear to you all. I'm not sure because on my end things are clear. So I hope you all were able to see and understand the content. Now I will let Natoya continue on attitudes towards differences.
Hi, me again. Before I move on, if anyone wants to watch over the videos presented today on your own, we'll post the links in the WhatsApp chat because I know because of the connectivity issues, it's a bit choppy. Okay, so now we are on to attitudes towards differences. Your attitude has a direct impact on how you communicate and collaborate with others. How we view others who are different from ourselves is complex. There is some evidence that this is a developmental or sequential process during which we move from complete unawareness as a child to some degree of acceptance or appreciation as a mature adult. Growing up, we go through different stages in life. Children begin to be aware or show signs of pre-prejudice as a result of socialization from parents, peers, and conform to the culture in which they grow up in. As we get older, our experience we have will determine how we want to treat people. Slide. Through the years, we begin to learn through positive and negative experiences. As a result of these experiences, some people learn to dislike and fear differences. In extreme cases, fears can lead to racism, homophobia, or sexism. Other experiences lead us to be appreciative and to embrace many differences. Look at Adolf Hitler, for example. He clearly learned through negative experiences. He hated the Jews. He wanted to wipe them out. It is unclear as to why, but there are many speculations. One being the differences between the races, culture, and religious beliefs. Jews in Europe had been victims of discrimination and persecution since the Middle Ages. Have you ever met someone that you didn't like at first sight? Like your blood just didn't take to them and you didn't know why? Perhaps the way they looked subconsciously triggered a bad feeling from a negative experience you had growing up. Slide. Take a look at this Riddle scale. It was initially developed by Dorothy Riddle as a scale of homophobia to understand attitudes towards gay and lesbian people, but students have found it helpful as a conceptual model for understanding the differences in others, as well as attitudes towards people with physical disabilities or different religious practices. The first four stages of the scale, repulsion, pity, tolerance, and acceptance, are negative attitudes because they come from a belief that the person who is different is somehow of less value than yourself, than oneself. The second group of four stages of the scale, support, admiration, appreciation, and nurturance, are positive levels of the scale because the other person is of value just as oneself is. Have you, as individuals, experienced to some degree these levels of attitudes, both negative and positive, towards others or from others? For example, you're walking through town and there's a crazy vagrant swinging his arms and cursing walking in your direction. Won't you feel repulsed and pity at the same time and cross the street? At work, do you find it difficult to tolerate some coworkers' attitudes, but try to accept them for how they are because you don't want to come off as being unprofessional? Do you support, admire, and appreciate the different members of your team, nurture and praise their differences in order to succeed as a unit? Riddell will now move on to cultural influences on leadership behavior. Thank you.
Okay, so awareness of how such aspects of diversity as sex, race, ethnicity, age, sexual identity, religion, ability, or socioeconomic status may influence our own behavior and that of others in groups is a step toward being an effective relational leader. No group is totally homogeneous. We define personality, preferences, attitudes, styles, value systems, beliefs, and opinions based on our cultural influences. Relational leadership values effective leadership processes within heterogeneous groups. Many leadership practices could be described as participative because they value the empowerment of followers, but relational and pluralistic leadership seeks to change the very culture of the organization or group to see the diversity of the group as a true asset. It would clearly be inaccurate to describe people based on only one aspect of their identity. Behaviors could grow from a complex interaction of many salient background factors. So it is better to observe people, behaviors, and seek to understand their attitudes than just to presume differences among people that are based on stereotypes. We generally tend to judge people and come up with a whole idea of how a person is in our head without even really knowing them or getting to know them. Even sometimes, depending on the media you've consumed or family conversations you've heard or specific experiences, you might end up having a specific view on a certain group of people. It is useful to examine the range of human behaviors that are essential in leadership settings. Consider the cultural influences in such leadership processes as communications, conflict resolution, and decision making. So, communication. You may observe a range of behaviors in a group. Some people may be highly verbal, with strong oral traditions. Others may be verbally reserved, preferring thoughtful writing. Some may be outgoing, expressive, and emotional, whereas the cultural assumptions of others lead them to be thoughtful, objective, and analytical. Depending on the mix of individuals, some will be open and revealing, whereas others would be closed and guarded. Some cultural assumptions lead people to be direct and factual. Others have learned to be more symbolic and metaphorical. Some have been taught to value direct or bold eye contact. Others find respect in indirect body language. Some have learned to be timely and to value promptness. Other cultures value casual approaches. I know a lot of times in Trinidad, things do start on time, you know. Some people just roll in, you know, they never on time and stuff like that. Like if it's a party or event and stuff. I learned the hard way not to come early because you'll have a help and thing, you know. So it's good to understand the mix of preferred communication patterns in any group because it could help the group to be more informed of this interaction. So instead of you judging someone like, oh, you're wrong or oh, you have no respect, it's useful to ask yourself, within that person's context, how do I understand this action or practice? And how would they want to be treated? One aspect of communication found to be useful is the idea of speech communities. A speech community exists when people share norms about how to use talk and what purposes it serves. This can be important to keep in mind because persons from different speech communities may misunderstand each other. Speech communities can be determined by gender, ethnicity, workplace interests, or other groupings that share common core patterns about language and how it's used. Recognizing and respecting different speech communities increases our ability to participate competently in a diverse culture. Um, the book used an interesting example. I'm not sure how much of you will relate. But for example, students who are devoted players of a particular game like Halo have a language all on their own that people who do not play this game probably would not know. So like people like me who used to play Halo would be like, oh, go get the Banshee by the cliff or jump in the Scorpion. Obviously, people listening to this that never played that game would wonder what the JLI saying. But wait, question, anybody here know about Halo, the game?
Redal, I didn't even know you like Halo. That's like my favorite game.
Really?
So, yes.
Okay, interesting. I used to role play that back in secondary school. So yeah, um, experienced members of a student government organization could develop their own language using acronyms and inside jokes that could be less than inclusive when used around newly elected representatives. So I think everybody is probably like a part of a group where this happens, whether it's family or friends. You might have a specific way of communicating with each other, unique to that group. You might have little codes or little um, gestures and stuff that if someone wasn't in your friend group or your family group, they might be like, "What's going on? I don't understand," or out of the loop, right? So conflict resolution. You might observe individuals with a range of behaviors, from the confrontational to the very subtle. Some may encourage taking responsibility and being accountable. Others will tend to blame. Still, others will seek harmony and face saving. Some believe their way is right and are closed off to other options, whereas others seek connections among options. You ever dealt with someone who does talk the most nonsense, but you know they believe they're right and they're not listening to you? Or you know, a lot of I would say a lot of parents and thing would say like, "Is my way or the highway?" You know, that saying and stuff. So some resolve conflict by being differential to authority, whereas others have learned to be confrontational to authority figures. Finally, some people will link resolution to values like harmony with nature. Conflict resolution is a critical aspect of relational leadership. Almost any change effort will involve some degree of conflict. Sorry. Remaining focused on the purpose of the change while maintaining positive relationships is necessary. At the same time, it is also important to remain ethical and inclusive, but even more necessary in times of conflict when the tendency can be to try to go it alone or try to just make it all go away. Decision making. The way in which decisions are made reflects either those who value the power of majority rule and prefer voting, or those who seek inclusion of the minority opinion and value consensus. In some groups, if the will of the group does not emerge as apparent, an issue may be dropped completely and brought up at a later time. Some believe the hierarchy and authorities should decide, whereas others think the experts or those involved should decide. Relational leadership requires communication skills that help each person seek to understand others, not just persuade them. All communicators should constantly ask themselves, how do my perspectives and preferences shade my view? In what ways could I be understood more correctly and understand with greater insight? Leadership and communication. Just about everything done in life is enhanced by being a more effective communicator. Communication skills involve far more than persuasive talking or skillful writing. As one student teacher said once, God gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth. So, the whole point of that message is to listen more than I talk. For most of us, hearing is a natural and almost automatic process, right? But listening, however, is more difficult and is a purposive activity. So it's easy to hear, but not as easy to listen. Listening and communication in a pluralistic context requires one to listen with empathy. Listening with empathy is an intellectual and emotional participation. Yeah, is a emotional participation in another's person's experience. Empathy means you are using another person's standards and reference points to understand that person's experience. In contrast, sympathy is putting yourself in the other person's place, but retaining your own perspective and still using your own standard of judgment. In other words, sympathy is about feeling sorry or sad about, like someone or a person, but with empathy is you being able to see yourself understanding the experiences of others from their viewpoint and their perspective. You're putting yourself in that mindset, imagining how they feel and connecting with the emotions others are experiencing when they communicate. This means trying to see others as they would want you to see them and becoming able to understand what others are feeling without being told directly. Imagine a friend with low self-esteem who confides, I made a comment in our meeting today and it was awful, and people laugh at me. Showing sympathy and remembering times you have said things like that when you just needed a moral boost. You might say, oh, it probably wasn't that bad. You know, probably what you said was funny and probably nobody even remembers, is a response you may have. But responding with empathy now, you may say something like, I know how hard it is to speak up in that meeting. You know, you're not really used to that setting, and it must have been very scary for you. So I understand. That second response leads to more genuine dialogue than the first. The first one kind of denied your friend's emotion and the apparent pain of the experience, you know? So you learn to listen for empathy. If you try to find a point of agreement or genuine understanding with a previous speaker and build on it instead of immediately criticizing, rejecting, or denying the point. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. This requires one to pause, think, restate for understanding, then build on that point. Criticism that comes too quickly leaves the first speaker thinking he or she was not heard. Empathic communication is difficult. Think of the complexity of processes in typical conversation. The content of what we say and how we say it influence the receiver, informing meaning from what we share. Communication involves both verbal and nonverbal components. Think of the complexity in this verbal process. What I meant to say, what I actually said, what you heard me say, what you think I mean, what you mean to say, what you actually say, what I hear you say, and what I think you mean. Assertive communication. In every communication, each person has a right to be heard and a responsibility to listen. Each has a right to make a request or ask a question, and the recipient has the right to make his or her own decision without an apology. Imagine an assertiveness continuum with three positions. A person might be either unassertive, assertive, or aggressive. If you are unassertive, you passively give up your rights to others and let them advantage you. After an encounter, you may often wish you had said something or do something differently. Being assertive doesn't mean that you get your own way, but that you did what you could to be understood. In a similar way, practicing relational leadership doesn't mean that the group will go along with what you think should happen in the group, but that you would have done your best to respect their involvement. Listen for true understanding and be a productive community member. So here's a scenario. The question is, could you substitute for me at an event tonight? I had something come up and cannot go after all. So for those who have been in the similar work position or wherever it is, might relate to this question being asked. And you could see based on these examples how maybe your response would have been, whether assertive or unassertive and stuff. So the unassertive response is, okay, sure, I guess I could do it. Even though you have several plans, right? You reply most meekly. You deny your own rights and you're intimidated into compliance. You may feel trapped or afraid to say no. You're fairly passive. I know I relate to that one a lot, this feeling of, you just have to just say yes, even if you really don't want to do something or you really can't do something, The assertive response would be, no, I have other plans and I can't do it. Depending on his style, he might say, I'm sorry, I cannot substitute. He might ask me again sometime when I would have a little more time to change my plans. But thanks for thinking of me. This response acknowledges that the other person had every right to ask, and you have a right to make your own decision. Being assertive means you could say no without feeling guilty or having to apologize. An aggressive response now would be, how dare you ask me to do this? You always slack off and you're always slacking off on your responsibilities, and I'm not gonna stand for it anymore. So you telling somebody off like that, this response denies the other person had any right to even ask you for help in the first place and is really appropriate. Relational empathy. Working effectively together requires relational empathy. Relational empathy goes beyond merely understanding another, in which the emphasis is upon the recreation in the listener. Recreation in the listener of the meaning originally created by the speaker, and seeks shared meaning. Relational empathy recognizes the importance of context. It may mean creating a new third culture that synthesizes the positions from the two individuals' perspectives, culture, and context, and builds a new culture, an environment of empathy and insight. As sharing of context takes place, organizations of diverse people start weaving in new contexts. This third culture or common text develops its own jargon, definitions, visions, and understandings, through which members from different contexts can come together. In these organizations, the cultures say people are good, honest, and trustworthy. People are purposeful. Each individual has a unique contribution to make. Complex problems require local solutions. Me and you versus me or you. These beliefs about the goodness of people guide how we approach others. Self-fulfilling prophecy demonstrates that people may indeed become as you see them. So if you think no one will get along in the group, conflict is bound to occur and be harmful. If you believe people will avoid responsibility, then you may shape your own behavior to be controlling and negative, and you may act discouraged. So you're just based on how you think things gonna go, your personality might just try to anticipate that situation when that situation might not even occur, you know? So those with whom you are engaged are likely to become as you anticipate. Conversely, if you think people will try to get along, want to face their sources of conflict, be helpful, and take responsibility, then you approach your behaviors in hopeful ways that make that prophecy come true. Imagine going to your first group project meeting thinking that people will just slack off, that you will end up doing all the work and that no one really cares. Like in this, if I just went with the idea that Natoya not gonna do nothing and I just going and be here doing everything, I might end up kind of um I would look for evidence for those assumptions. So I will look for any small thing with her and just, say like, I knew it, I knew she wasn't going to do this or something. Is a very negative outlook on things and a negative way of approaching situations. So imagine instead going to your first project committee meeting thinking, we are all busy, so we will have to be careful about what we take on. But people will want to do their part and we can come up with something worthwhile. For example, even with this group project with me and Natoya, that was the case. I know that Natoya has a busy schedule and has a lot of stuff to do. So we made sure and choose things that one piqued our interests and also stuff we would like to present and also things that are within our means, you know? So is knowing our strengths and weaknesses. So there are very real differences in environments, and groups may be negative in one setting and welcoming in another. The biggest difference in how a setting is perceived is the internal assumptions that guide expectations. How one will be in that setting and how being that way brings out responses in others. Building this new third culture meets the challenge inherent in the opening question: how am I like everyone else here? In conclusion, the ability to understand others, be understood by others, and together create an effective organizational or group environment is the challenge of relational leadership. Truly understand the influences of our cultural heritage, gender, and other aspects of our difference helps us work together towards change. We usually find we are more alike than we are different. Expecting qualities, goodwill, and shared purposes can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. This awareness helps us create a new third culture in any group. So these are the references for all the um uh, all the sources we used. Thank you.
Any questions and comments? Okay, that will be all for today. Thank you for listening.
Very good.